The air on Titan was a cocktail of methane and nitrogen, but inside the human embassy, the atmosphere was a different kind of toxic. Commander Emma Larkins watched with feigned indifference as the Gluur ambassador, a creature resembling a jellyfish with a penchant for condescension, unveiled another slide in its tedious presentation. The holographic display showed a graph plummeting downward, human military capabilities, according to their intel. Larkins stifled a laugh, turning it into a cough. The Gluur, wavering in the low gravity, misinterpreted her reaction as confirmation and continued. As you can see, the ambassador declared, its voice a series of melodious hums translated by a universal interpreter, your species' military strength is declining exponentially. The Gluur Federation believes this is a perfect opportunity for cooperative discussions. Oh, absolutely, Larkins replied, struggling to keep a straight face. We're practically on our last legs, aren't we? Her gaze flicked towards the rest of the human delegation, each of whom was expertly mirroring her expression of mock concern. Outside the embassy, Titan's orange haze was thick with mystery, hiding the realities the Gluur assumed they understood. Larkins knew better. The truth was buried beneath layers of human ingenuity and deception. Suddenly, the room's comm system crackled to life. Commander Larkins, urgent message from Earth, a voice announced in a clipped tone. She nodded, signaling her team to manage the Gluur while she attended to the new development. Exiting the conference room, she entered a secure booth and activated the encrypted channel. This is Larkins, go ahead. Commander, Operation Decoy is a go, a voice replied. Larkins' heart rate quickened. The fleet is in position. Await your command. Larkins grinned, exhilaration bubbling beneath her cool demeanor. Understood. Proceed as planned. Make it look like an accident. She returned to the conference, where the Gluur ambassador was still humming over their supposed advantages. Apologies, she said, taking her seat again. Just a minor issue with our, antiquated technology. The ambassador's tendrils fluttered with what Larkins interpreted as smug satisfaction. Understandable, given your current state. Larkins leaned back, eyes glinting with a mixture of amusement and anticipation. Yes, it's a wonder we've managed to stay afloat at all, she replied, watching the Gluur and knowing full well that humanity's true strength was about to turn the tables. And then, just as her words hung in the air, a distant rumble reverberated through the embassy walls. The Gluur ambassador paused, its tendrils twitching with curiosity and a tinge of concern. Larkins checked her watch, hiding a triumphant smile. Must be the methane storms, she mused aloud, while the embassy's alarms remained suspiciously silent. The Gluur ambassador turned towards her, its body language shifting to one of unease. Perhaps you underestimated the weather conditions here, Larkins suggested innocuously. Inside, she counted down the minutes until humanity's real message would be delivered. The rumble grew louder, a promise of action and revelation, as a wave of irreversible change swept silently across Titan's surface. The air inside the cramped command center of the HSS Indomitable was thick with the kind of tension that could make even the most seasoned soldier break into a nervous sweat. Major Jane, ironclad, Carter, the commanding officer of the Human Expeditionary Force in Sector Delta 9, stood at the holomap table trying to piece together the chaos unraveling across the screen. Around her, the bridge crew was a flurry of activity, each member desperately attempting to outpace the rapidly deteriorating situation. Major, we've lost contact with Outpost Theta, Lieutenant Ramirez reported, his voice a mix of disbelief and urgency. His eyes were glued to a series of flickering red dots on his console, indicators that were once friendly outposts, now ominous voids on the map. That's the third one in the last hour, Carter responded, her eyes narrowing as she mentally recalculated their strategic position, or the lack thereof. Patch me through to Colonel Tagawa on the ground. I want to know what in the universe is going on down there. The communications officer nodded, fingers flicking across the console. Moments later, the grizzled visage of Colonel Tagawa appeared on the holoscreen, static crackling around the edges of his image. He was hunkered down in what appeared to be a makeshift command center, the walls behind him vibrating with the echoes of distant bombardments. Major Carter, Tagawa began, his voice steady despite the chaos around him. We're being overwhelmed. It's like they anticipated our every move. These aren't just random skirmishes, they're coordinated strikes. Carter pursed her lips, irritation simmering just beneath the surface. Who are they, Colonel? You know as well as I do that we haven't faced any organized resistance in this sector before. Colonel Tagawa glanced over his shoulder, his expression grim. We don't know exactly who or what they are, Major. But they've got tech that makes ours look like slingshots and stones. And they're not just hitting military targets. They're taking out supply lines, comms relays, even civilian installations. Carter's mind raced, linking the dots with a grim certainty. They're cutting us off, she said, more to herself than to the colonel. Isolate, incapacitate, eliminate. Classic tactics. Exactly, Tagawa replied. It's like someone pulled this strategy straight out of the How to Conquer Humans for Dummies playbook. Carter couldn't help but let out a dry chuckle, appreciating the gallows humor despite the dire circumstances. Well, we might need a new chapter on how to survive the apocalypse. The bridge crew exchanged glances, the reality of the situation settling over them like a suffocating fog. Carter turned her attention back to the holomap, her mind a whirlwind of strategies and counter-strategies. Lieutenant Ramirez, she called, I want a report on all available assets. Ships, troops, anything that can be mobilized. I refuse to let this sector fall on my watch. Yes, ma'am, Ramirez replied, already relaying orders to compile the data. As the lieutenant worked, Carter's gaze fell on the lone ship hovering on the periphery of the map, an alien vessel of unknown design that had appeared out of nowhere and now loomed as a silent sentinel over the battlefield. Its presence was a constant reminder of the unknown enemy they faced, its dark hull absorbing the light around it like a black hole threatening to consume them all. That ship, Carter muttered to herself, it's the key to all this. Find out who's behind it, and we might just have a chance. It was then that the ship's silhouette flickered on the holoscreen, a new development that caught everyone's attention. Major, receiving an encrypted transmission from the alien vessel, the communications officer announced, unable to mask the surprise in his voice. Carter took a deep breath, steeling herself for whatever fresh hell awaited on the other side of that transmission. Put it through, she ordered. The screen shifted to reveal a figure shrouded in shadow, its features obscured by a cloak that seemed woven from the darkness itself. When it spoke, the voice was a chilling blend of distortion and clarity, the words both foreign and eerily comprehensible. Humans, the figure began, its tone dripping with condescension. You have trespassed into our dominion, and now you must pay the price for your hubris. Carter's jaw tightened, her frustration boiling over. Who are you? She demanded, her voice carrying the weight of authority. And what do you want? The figure's lips curled into a sinister smile. We are the Vraxian sovereignty, the rightful rulers of this sector. Your presence is an affront to our supremacy. Surrender now, and perhaps we shall show mercy. The bridge descended into murmurs of disbelief, the notion of surrender anathema to the human spirit. Carter's eyes burned with defiance. You must be new to dealing with humans. We don't surrender, ever. The Vraxian's smile widened, as if amused by the response. Then you leave us no choice. Prepare to be annihilated. With that, the transmission cut off, leaving the bridge in a stunned silence broken only by the persistent hum of the ship's systems. Carter exhaled slowly, her resolve hardening into a steely determination. All right, everyone, you heard them. They think they can scare us into submission. Let's show them how wrong they are. As the crew sprang into action, Carter focused on the task at hand. She refused to let fear dictate their fate. The humans had faced extinction before and had always emerged victorious, thanks to their ingenuity, stubbornness, and sheer willpower. Deploy the Iron Fist Battalion, she ordered. Tell Captain Okoro to make some noise. We need to buy time for reinforcements to arrive. Yes, Major, Ramirez acknowledged, his voice betraying a hint of newfound hope. Carter turned to the bridge's tactical officer, Lieutenant Singh, who was busy coordinating the ship's defensive systems. Singh, I want every gun on this ship ready to fire at a moment's notice. If that Vraxian ship so much as flinches, I want it turned into space dust. Understood, Major, Singh replied with a nod, his fingers dancing over the control panel like a concert pianist preparing for a symphony of destruction. The tension on the bridge was palpable, but it was not born from fear. Instead, it was a shared resolve, a collective understanding that they stood on the brink of something monumental. The crew of the HSS Indomitable was not just fighting for themselves, but for the very future of humanity. As the Iron Fist Battalion launched from the ship's hangar, a squadron of fighters escorting them into the fray, Carter allowed herself a brief moment of reflection. She thought of Earth, a world she had not seen in years, and the billions of lives depending on them to hold the line. The weight of that responsibility was immense, but it was a burden she was proud to carry. "Major," Ramirez called out, interrupting her reverie. "We've intercepted a Vraxian comm signal. It's peculiar. They're coordinating with something called the Overmind." Carter's eyebrows arched in curiosity. The Overmind? Sounds like something out of a bad science fiction novel. What do we know about it? Not much, Ramirez admitted, his expression a mix of intrigue and concern. But if they're coordinating with it, then it's likely a central control system. Could explain their uncanny precision in these attacks. Carter considered this new piece of the puzzle, her mind racing with possibilities. If we can disrupt their coordination, we might be able to level the playing field. "Keep digging, Lieutenant. Find out everything you can about this Overmind." "On it, Major," Ramirez replied, already diving back into the data streams. As the battle unfolded outside, the crew of the HSS Indomitable worked tirelessly, each member driven by the knowledge that their actions could tip the scale of the conflict. The Vraxians might have had the element of surprise, but humans had an ace up their sleeve, an indomitable spirit and an unyielding resolve to claim victory against all odds. In the thick of the battle, Captain Okoro's voice crackled over the comms. "Major, we've engaged the enemy ground forces. Their tech is impressive, but so far, nothing we can't handle. We'll keep them busy, but we need support." Carter nodded, knowing the captain couldn't see her. "You've got it, Captain. Reinforcements are on the way. Just hold the line." As Captain Okoro acknowledged the order, the sound of explosions reverberated through the comms, a haunting symphony of destruction and defiance. Carter knew the captain and her troops would fight tooth and nail to keep the Vraxians at bay, exemplifying the best of humanity's fighting spirit. Meanwhile, Lieutenant Ramirez's voice cut through the chaos. "Major, I've got something. The Overmind is a central command system located on that alien ship. If we can disable it, we might disrupt their entire operation." "Then that's our target," Carter declared, her eyes blazing with determination. "Prepare a strike team. We're going after that ship. It's about time we taught these Vraxians what a real human welcome feels like." The prospect of a direct assault on the alien vessel was daunting, but Carter felt a surge of adrenaline at the challenge. It was the bold move they needed to turn the tide, the kind of audacious plan that had secured humanity's survival countless times before. As the strike team assembled, Carter joined them in the ship's hangar, her presence a reassuring force among the troops. She surveyed the determined faces before her, each soldier ready to lay down their life for a chance at victory. "Listen up," she addressed them, her voice cutting through the din. "This mission isn't just about taking down a ship. It's about sending a message. We are the human race, and we will not be intimidated. The Vraxians think they've got us cornered, but they're about to find out what happens when you back a cornered wolf into a corner." The troops cheered, their resolve bolstered by her words. They knew the odds were stacked against them, but they also knew that humanity had defied the odds before. As they boarded the assault craft, Carter took a moment to reflect on the journey that had brought them to this point. The sacrifices made, the battles fought, and the unyielding hope that had carried them through the darkest of times. The craft launched from the Indomitable, slicing through the void of space toward the alien vessel. The Vraxian ship loomed ahead, a fortress of unknown horrors and untapped potential. But Carter and her team were undeterred, their focus singular and unyielding. As they approached the enemy ship, the assault craft's systems came alive with alarms, warning of incoming enemy fire. The Vraxians had not been idle, and their defenses roared to life with deadly precision. Carter steeled herself, her grip firm on the controls. "All right, people, this is it. Let's go show these Vraxians why humans are the most dangerous species in the universe." The assault craft weaved through the barrage, evading enemy fire with deft maneuvers. The tension was palpable, each second stretching into an eternity as they closed in on the Vraxian vessel. And then, with a resolve that could shatter worlds, they breached the enemy ship. The battle was far from over, but for Major Jane Carter and her team, it was just beginning. The clock was ticking, the stakes higher than ever, and the fate of humanity hung in the balance. But as they charged forward, hearts ablaze with determination, one thing was certain. The Vraxians were about to learn a hard lesson in human tenacity. The briefing room aboard the USS Dauntless buzzed with a quiet tension, an electric anticipation that fizzled through the recycled air, settling into the metal walls as if the ship itself were holding its breath. Captain Elena Lockhart stood at the head of the room, her eyes scanning the faces of her officers. She wondered, not for the first time, if they realized the full magnitude of the game they were playing, or the stakes of the bluff they'd just doubled down on. "Sitrep," she barked, more to break the silence than from any real need to hear what she already knew. The words were familiar, comforting even, like a childhood bedtime story she couldn't quite remember but always felt. Lieutenant Commander Jason Patel, her XO and the only person on the ship who dared talk back to her, cleared his throat. "Enemy fleet is holding position at the edge of the system. Still no signs of aggression, but their sensors are probing more aggressively." "They're catching on, Captain." Lockhart nodded, her face a mask of studied calm. "And our malfunctions? Still convincing, ma'am. Engineering reports our power fluctuations are indistinguishable from genuine failures. Communications are down to intermittent bursts. If I didn't know better, I'd say we were dead in the water." "Good. Keep it that way," Lockhart said. "They can't know what we're capable of." The irony was, of course, that neither could humanity. Locked into a desperate conflict with the technologically superior Zelnath, the human fleet had resorted to what they did best, playing dead until the right moment. The Zelnath, with their plasma shields and quantum torpedoes, had an edge that even Earth's brightest minds couldn't outthink. Outnumbered and outgunned, humanity's position was desperate. As if on cue, the ship's lights flickered, casting shadows that danced ominously across Lockhart's unreadable expression. Despite the carefully orchestrated appearance of dysfunction, the power surges were unsettlingly real. The irony of pretending to be crippled while actually hobbling along on a wing and a prayer was not lost on her. "Captain," Patel said, a hint of concern in his voice. "We can't keep this up forever." Lockhart glanced around the room, meeting the eyes of her officers. They were a good crew, maybe the best she'd ever commanded, but even the best had limits. "I know, Jason, but we don't need forever. Just long enough to make them underestimate us. And if they don't?" It was Lieutenant Sarah Kwan, the ship's tactical officer, her voice sharp with the edge of someone who knew exactly how precarious their position was. "Then we improvise," Lockhart replied with a grim smile. "It's not like we haven't done that before." Kwan snorted, an entirely inappropriate sound that nonetheless broke the tension. "Right, because that always works out so well for us." The irony of their entire situation was that humanity had stumbled into space with all the grace of a toddler learning to walk. They'd scraped and scrambled their way into the galactic community, making allies and enemies in equal measure. The Zelnath, unfortunately, fell into the latter category. "Captain," Patel said, a new urgency in his voice. "Incoming transmission from the Zelnath flagship." Lockhart straightened, her expression sharpening. "Put it through." The holographic projector flickered to life, casting the elongated features of High Commander Vrax into the room. His eyes, black and bottomless as a starless night, surveyed the humans with the dispassionate interest of a predator assessing its prey. "Captain Lockhart," Vrax intoned, his voice a sibilant hiss. "It appears your vessel is experiencing difficulties." Lockhart's lips curved into a smile that held no warmth. "Nothing we can't handle, Commander Vrax. Just routine maintenance." Vrax's lips, thin and cruel, twisted into something that might have been amusement. "Indeed, your persistence is admirable." Lockhart inclined her head, the barest acknowledgement. "Is there something we can help you with, Commander?" "Only your surrender," Vrax replied, the words hanging in the air like a guillotine's blade. "Your resistance is doomed. Your technology is primitive. End this charade." Lockhart's smile widened, a flash of teeth that might have been mistaken for a snarl. "I'll take it under advisement." The transmission ended with a snap, and the room exhaled as one. Lockhart turned to face her officers, her expression unreadable. "Well, that was fun." "Fun isn't the word I'd use," Kwan muttered, her hands moving over her console in a dance of data analysis and strategic planning. "We're outmatched, Captain." "Vrax isn't wrong about that." "No, he's not," Lockhart agreed, her tone a study in calculated indifference. "But he's not seeing the whole picture, either." Patel crossed his arms, the gesture one of skepticism more than defiance. "And what picture is that, Captain?" "That we're not as helpless as we look," Lockhart said, her eyes glinting with a fierce resolve. The Zelnath see what they want to see, a species barely capable of spaceflight, struggling to hold its own. They don't see the ingenuity, the adaptability, or the desperation, Patel added, a wry note in his voice. Desperation breeds innovation, Lockhart countered. And right now, that's our best weapon. There was a pause, a moment of collective reflection as the enormity of their situation settled over them once more. The Zelnath fleet was a juggernaut, a force that had crushed civilizations far more advanced than humanity. But Lockhart wasn't ready to concede, not yet. Captain, Quan said, breaking the silence. I've been running simulations based on what we know of their fleet formations. There might be a way to exploit their overconfidence. Go on, Lockhart prompted, her interest piqued. If we can lure them into a tight formation, we might be able to overload their shields with a coordinated burst from our remaining weaponry. It wouldn't destroy them, but it could create an opening. An opening we can't exploit, Patel pointed out, his voice measured. Not without revealing our hand. Lockhart considered this, weighing the options in her mind. The plan was risky, but risk was their currency now. Every decision was a gamble, every choice a potential turning point. We need more time, she said finally. If we can hold them off long enough, we might find a way to turn their strength against them. Time is a luxury we don't have, Patel reminded her, his voice gentle but firm. Then we'll make it, Lockhart replied, her tone brooking no argument. We can't afford to play it safe, not now. The officers exchanged glances, a silent agreement passing between them. They would follow Lockhart, not because they believed in the plan, but because they believed in her. Let's get to work, Lockhart said, her gaze sweeping the room. We have a galaxy to surprise. As the officers dispersed, Patel lingered, his expression thoughtful. You really think we can pull this off? He asked, his voice low enough that only she could hear. Lockhart met his eyes, her resolve unshakable. I think we have to try. And if we fail, well, at least we'll go down fighting. Patel nodded, a reluctant smile tugging at his lips. Guess there's worse ways to go. Exactly, Lockhart said, clapping him on the shoulder. Now, let's give the Zelnath a show they won't soon forget. As Patel left the room, Lockhart turned back to the holographic display, her mind already racing ahead. She couldn't shake the feeling that they were on the verge of something monumental, a turning point in the war that had ravaged humanity. The Zelnath were powerful, but they were not infallible, and in the quiet moments between the chaos, Lockhart allowed herself a flicker of hope, a hope that, against all odds, humanity might just outsmart its fate. The days that followed were a blur of activity aboard the Dauntless. The crew performed their duties with a grim determination, each person a cog in a machine that had to function flawlessly to survive. The illusion of helplessness was maintained at great cost, every malfunction a carefully orchestrated dance that kept the Zelnath at bay. Lockhart spent long hours in the command center, her eyes fixed on the tactical displays that mapped the fleet's position. The Zelnath remained ominously still, their ships a dark galaxy against the backdrop of stars. It was a standoff, a waiting game that tested the nerves of everyone aboard. As the tension mounted, Lockhart found herself reflecting on her crew, the people who had become her family in this unending war. Patel, ever the skeptic, whose quiet strength anchored her. Quan, whose tactical brilliance was matched only by her sarcastic wit. And the others, each with their own stories, their own reasons for fighting. It was in these moments, the quiet before the storm, that Lockhart understood the true scope of her mission. This wasn't just about survival, it was about proving that humanity, for all its flaws and frailties, was capable of more than anyone, including themselves, had ever imagined. And yet, as the days wore on, the situation grew increasingly dire. Supplies dwindled, energy reserves ebbed to critical levels. The crew's morale, once a beacon of defiance, began to waver under the weight of uncertainty. In private, Lockhart grappled with the enormity of her responsibility. The burden of command was a heavy one, and though she wore it with pride, there were nights when she lay awake, haunted by the faces of those she'd lost, those she might still lose. But there was no time for doubt, no room for second-guessing. The Zelnath were watching, waiting for any sign of weakness. And so Lockhart pushed forward, driven by a fierce determination to defy the odds stacked against them. As the clock ticked down to the moment of reckoning, Lockhart gathered her officers for one final briefing. The mood in the room was somber, the air thick with unspoken fears and unyielding resolve. "This is it," Lockhart said, her voice steady despite the storm raging within her. "We've got one shot at this, and it has to count." Quan nodded, her expression fierce. "We've run the numbers. If we time it right, we can create a window, but it'll be tight. And once that window's open, we hit them hard," Patel added. "We can't hold back." Lockhart surveyed her team, taking in the determination etched into every face. They were ready, or as ready as they could be. There was nothing left to say, no speeches or reassurances that could ease the burden they bore. "Let's make history," she said, her words a rallying cry that resonated through the room. As the officers dispersed, Lockhart remained behind, her gaze sweeping over the empty chairs. She felt the weight of their trust, the pulse of hope that beat beneath the surface of their fear. In that moment, she understood what it meant to lead, what it meant to stand on the precipice of the unknown and leap, not because you were certain of success, but because you believed in the possibility of it. And so, with the Zelnath fleet looming ever closer, Lockhart prepared to face the storm, her heart steadfast in the knowledge that, whatever the outcome, humanity would not go quietly into the night. The Dauntless was ready, and so was she. As the final countdown began, Lockhart stood at the helm, her mind clear, her purpose resolute. The Zelnath would learn what it meant to underestimate humanity. The game was on, and she intended to win. The airlock hissed open with a sound that could only be described as a cross between a snake's sigh and a deflating balloon, a fitting soundtrack as Lieutenant Sarah Mendoza led her bedraggled squad into the sterile gloom of the alien ship's corridor. The walls hummed with a low frequency that made her teeth vibrate in a way she would likely never grow accustomed to. It was as if the ship itself was mocking their very presence, and perhaps it was. The Zarnath were nothing if not connoisseurs of dramatic irony. "Welcome to the Death Trap Express," Corporal Jenkins muttered, his attempt at levity falling flat as it was absorbed into the oppressive silence. "Less sarcasm, more focus," Mendoza replied, but her own voice carried an edge of forced bravado. She could almost taste the tension in the recycled air, as thick and clammy as the anticipation before a storm. Behind her, the rest of the squad shuffled forward, their boots clanking against the metallic floor with a rhythm that might have been comforting under different circumstances. But here, in the bowels of a Zarnath cruiser, every sound seemed amplified, reverberating in a way that suggested the ship was eavesdropping on them, savoring their fear. Their mission, so deceptively simple on paper, had unraveled with the kind of speed that only a bureaucratic mind could find truly satisfying. "A quick infiltration," they said. "Disable the ship's engines," they said. In and out before the Zarnath could mount an effective response. But no one had counted on the Zarnath's annoying tendency to press their advantage with the enthusiasm of a child discovering that their opponent in a game of chess had lost their queen. The first sign of trouble had been the sudden, jarring announcement over the comms that every exit was now sealed. Mendoza was pretty sure the Zarnath captain was laughing as he relayed that tidbit. Then, they discovered that the ship's internal layout was a labyrinthine nightmare, corridors looping back on themselves like some cruel joke. And now, well, now they had company. Contacts. Private Lee's voice crackled over the squad's neural link, the digital sound tinged with static and stress. 2 o'clock and closing fast. Mendoza spun, raising her rifle. The corridor ahead shimmered oddly, the air bending as if seen through heat haze, before resolving into the sleek, insectoid forms of the Zarnath soldiers. Their chitinous armor gleamed in the dim light, segmented bodies moving with a fluid grace that always made humans look clumsy by comparison. "Hold the line," Mendoza ordered, even as her mind raced to find a way out of this mess. The Zarnath had them pinned between the proverbial rock and a hard place, with the squad's route back to their transport cut off and the engines still frustratingly operational. The Zarnath advanced, blaster rifles raised, their movements synchronized as if choreographed. Mendoza's team opened fire, the corridor flashing with staccato bursts of plasma. The Zarnath ducked and weaved, returning fire with precision that spoke of both superior training and the innate sense of irony that pervaded their species. Several rounds found their mark, dropping 2 of the Zarnath with satisfying thuds, but Mendoza knew it was a temporary reprieve. The Zarnath were relentless, their tactics designed to wear down even the most resilient foe. And right now, with dwindling ammo and frayed nerves, Mendoza's squad was a textbook example of a target ripe for the picking. "Suggestions, Lieutenant?" Jenkins asked, his tone devoid of the usual humor. Mendoza hesitated, not because she didn't have ideas, but because most of them involved gambles with long odds and potentially disastrous consequences. But then, wasn't that the human way? To leap into the unknown with both feet and hope for the best? She glanced around, studying the walls with renewed focus. The Zarnath might be masters of warfare, but humans had cornered the market on opportunistic improvisation. There's always the ducts, Mendoza said, more to herself than to anyone else. The squad looked at her with varying degrees of disbelief and resignation. The ducts, ma'am? Lee asked, his brow furrowing. Yes, the ducts, Mendoza replied, more certain now as she mapped out the plan in her head. They're small, but they'll bypass the main corridors. The Zarnath won't expect us to crawl through them, and it might get us close enough to sabotage the engine room. Or get stuck, Jenkins pointed out, but his voice carried a note of reluctant hope. Or get us stuck, Mendoza agreed, but it's a risk I'm willing to take if it means completing the mission. We didn't come all this way just to turn tail because things got a little hairy. A moment of silence followed, broken only by the distant echo of approaching Zarnath reinforcements. Mendoza watched as her team absorbed the plan, the flicker of determination reigniting in their eyes. It was a crazy idea, but it was their crazy idea, and that made all the difference. Right, let's move, she ordered, leading the way to a nearby access panel. A few swift kicks dislodged it, revealing the narrow, shadowed tunnel beyond. One by one, the squad clambered into the duct, the confined space forcing an intimacy that was both comforting and claustrophobic. Mendoza brought up the rear, sealing the panel just as the next wave of Zarnath soldiers appeared. She could almost imagine their confusion, the momentary lapse in their otherwise flawless execution. Inside the duct, the air was stale and metallic, the darkness complete save for the faint glow of their headlamps. Mendoza crawled forward, her movements awkward but determined, the sound of her team's labored breathing echoing in her ears. They inched along, the duct twisting and turning in ways that defied logic, each bend a fresh opportunity for disaster. Mendoza's mind whirled with calculations, trying to keep track of their position relative to the engine room. It was a mental exercise in spatial awareness, one she was thankful for during those endless endurance tests back in training. As they crawled, she could almost hear her drill sergeant's voice: adapt, improvise, overcome. It was the mantra that had been drilled into every soldier's head, and it was never more relevant than now. The journey was a test of endurance and willpower, each minute stretching into eternity. Mendoza's limbs ached from the cramped quarters, her muscles protesting with every movement. But the thought of giving up, of letting the Zarnath win, was enough to keep her going. Finally, after what felt like a lifetime, they reached a junction. Mendoza paused, consulting the mental map she had constructed. This was it, the duct that led directly above the engine room. Time for Phase 2, she whispered over the neural link. Her voice was barely audible, carried on a current of exhaustion and resolve. The squad carefully removed the grating, peering down into the engine room below. The sight was both awe-inspiring and daunting, a vast chamber filled with pulsating machinery, the very heart of the Zarnath cruiser. Mendoza's mind raced with possibilities, calculating the best way to disable the engines without turning the entire ship into a fireball. It was a delicate balance, one that required precision in the face of overwhelming odds. There's a junction box on the far wall, she pointed out, her eyes following the tangle of conduits. If we can rig a charge there, it should cause enough disruption to shut down the engines temporarily. That's a big if, Jenkins replied, but he was already checking his gear, readying the explosives. Big ifs are what we do best, Mendoza said, a smile tugging at her lips despite the gravity of the situation. It was a gamble, but it was their gamble, and they owned it. With careful precision, they lowered themselves into the engine room, moving with the practiced silence of seasoned operatives. The slightest misstep could spell disaster, but they were past the point of no return. Jenkins worked quickly, his fingers deftly setting the charges while Mendoza kept watch. Her heart raced, each second stretching into a small eternity as they defied the odds stacked against them. Finally, Jenkins signaled completion, and they retreated back into the duct, sealing it behind them just as the first tremors shook the ship. The explosion was a muted rumble, the ship shuddering as its engines sputtered and died. Well, that worked, Jenkins said, his voice a mix of disbelief and relief. For now, Mendoza replied, knowing that their respite was temporary. The Zarnath would regroup, their efficiency undeterred by this setback. They crawled onward, Mendoza's mind already anticipating the next move. The ship's chaos would give them an advantage, but only if they acted quickly. Emerging from the ducts, they found themselves in an unfamiliar corridor, the ship's emergency lights casting an eerie glow. Mendoza's heart sank as she realized they were further from the shuttle bay than anticipated. "Looks like we're taking the scenic route," Lee said, attempting to lighten the mood. "Then let's make it a quick tour," Mendoza replied, urgency propelling her forward. They moved with purpose, navigating the twists and turns with a determination that belied their exhaustion. The ship was a maze of confusion, each corner hiding potential threats, but Mendoza's instincts guided them with an uncanny precision. Yet, just as they neared their goal, the final obstacle revealed itself with cruel predictability. A squad of Zarnath soldiers awaited them, their weapons raised in a silent challenge. Mendoza's heart sank, the realization striking her like a blow. They had played their hand, and now it was time to face the consequences. The Zarnath captain stepped forward, their posture one of smug superiority. "You humans never cease to amaze," the Zarnath captain said, their voice dripping with irony. "Always so eager to defy the odds, no matter how insurmountable." Mendoza met their gaze, her expression one of defiance. "It's kind of our thing," she replied, her tone unwavering even in the face of overwhelming odds. The Zarnath soldiers tightened their grip on their weapons, the tension in the air palpable. Mendoza's squad braced themselves, ready for the fight of their lives. In that moment, surrounded by enemies and with no way out, Mendoza understood what made humans truly special. It wasn't just their adaptability or creativity, but their capacity to hope, to push forward in the darkest moment, even when the odds were stacked against them. The Zarnath had underestimated that, and it was a mistake Mendoza intended to exploit to the fullest. As the battle began, she knew one thing for certain: they would fight until their last breath, and maybe, just maybe, they would find a way to turn the tide. As the third moon of Epsilon Prime cast its pale light over the ravaged remnants of Outpost Zeta 7, Captain Raina Maddox surveyed the bleak landscape from her vantage atop the crumbling command center. The air was thick with the acrid smoke of scorched earth, the remnants of what was once a thriving frontier settlement. Now, it was nothing more than a battleground of twisted metal and shattered dreams. Her troops, those that remained, huddled around makeshift fires, their faces gaunt and hollow-eyed, the flickering flames reflecting their last vestiges of hope. The war against the Xel'Naga had been relentless, a brutal symphony of destruction that had seen humanity pushed to the brink. The Xel'Naga, with their superior technology and impervious arrogance, had swept across the human territories like an unstoppable force. Their towering dreadnoughts cast shadows over entire continents, their plasma cannons reducing cities to smoldering craters. Resistance seemed futile, a futile last stand against an enemy that considered themselves the apex species of the galaxy. But if the Xel'Naga had not learned one thing about humans, it was that giving up was simply not in their DNA. Raina inhaled deeply, the air biting her lungs with its chill. She had fought tooth and nail to hold this outpost, one of the few remaining footholds on Epsilon Prime, and she wasn't about to let it slip away without a fight. As she glanced down at the remnants of her squad, she couldn't help but feel a swell of pride. These soldiers, these ragtag survivors, were the epitome of human resilience, a testament to humanity's stubborn refusal to be extinguished. "Captain," a voice crackled over her earpiece. It was Lieutenant Henry Sykes, her second in command. "Scouts report another wave of Xel'Naga forces moving in from the east. ETA 10 minutes. Raina closed her eyes, briefly allowing herself to imagine a world free of war before reality yanked her back into its cold embrace. "How's our ammunition, Henry? We're down to our last few crates. If the Xel'Naga don't kill us, our lack of bullets will," Sykes replied, his tone wryly fatalistic. "Right," Raina nodded, more to herself than to anyone else. "Well, let's make sure every shot counts. Gather the troops. It's time for a pep talk." As she descended the shaky stairs, Raina's mind raced. The odds were stacked against them, and the Xel'Naga would be giddy with triumph, their insufferable sense of superiority blinding them to the tenacity of their prey. If they believed victory was assured, then it was their arrogance that would be humanity's greatest ally. The soldiers assembled quickly, forming a ragged line, their faces a canvas of dirt and determination. Raina stood before them, arms crossed, searching for the right words to ignite the fire that still smoldered in their hearts. "We're outnumbered, outgunned, and quite frankly, out of our minds to think we can win this," she began, a faint smile playing on her lips. A few soldiers chuckled, the tension momentarily lifted. But if there's one thing the Xel'Naga don't understand, it's that humans are at their best when their backs are against the wall. We are stubborn, we are defiant, and we are downright annoying to those who underestimate us. The soldiers straightened, their eyes meeting hers with renewed resolve. The Xel'Naga think they've already won. They've taken our worlds, our families, and our future. But they haven't taken our spirit. As long as we stand, they haven't won. So let's give them hell. Let's make them wish they'd picked a fight with someone else. A collective roar erupted from the crowd, a primal sound that reverberated through the ruins, echoing Reyna's defiance. It was a sound that transcended defeat, a sound that defied the very notion of surrender. As the soldiers dispersed to their positions, Reyna felt a flicker of hope kindling within her. The Xel'Naga might have superiority in numbers, but they lacked the one thing humans possessed in abundance: the sheer, unrelenting will to survive. The minutes ticked by, each one a drumbeat leading to the inevitable clash. As the distant rumble of Xel'Naga war machines grew louder, Reyna took her place at the forefront, her pulse steady and her mind clear. She glanced at Sykes, who gave her a thumbs up, his face a mask of grim determination. "Here they come," Sykes muttered, peering through binoculars at the advancing horde. "And look at them, marching in like they own the place." Reyna smirked. "Let's show them they're trespassing." The first wave of Xel'Naga soldiers emerged from the shadows, their exoskeletons glinting ominously under the moonlight. They moved with an unsettling precision, their ranks a disciplined phalanx of death. Plasma bolts began to rain down, scorching the ground around Reyna and her troops, the air alive with the hiss of deadly energy. "Fire at will," Reyna bellowed, raising her weapon and squeezing the trigger. The night exploded into chaos, tracers tearing through the darkness, a furious volley of defiance against the encroaching enemy. The Xel'Naga staggered slightly, their formation buckling under the unexpected ferocity of the human defense. It was a small victory, a fleeting glimpse of what was possible if they could hold on just a little longer. But the Xel'Naga were relentless, their advance inexorable. For every one that fell, two more took its place, an unending tide that threatened to swallow the defenders whole. Reyna's heart pounded as she reloaded, her fingers moving with practiced speed, the clang of spent shells a steady rhythm amidst the cacophony. "Captain, we're being flanked," Sykes shouted, pointing to the east where a second contingent of Xel'Naga approached, their armor glistening like malevolent stars. Reyna swore under her breath, her mind racing for a solution. They were outnumbered, outflanked, and on the brink of annihilation. Yet, as she stood there, surrounded by the chaos of battle, a strange sense of calm washed over her. It was in this moment of clarity that an idea sparked, a desperate plan born of necessity. "Sykes, get me a line to command," Reyna ordered, her voice steady despite the madness around her. Sykes nodded, ducking behind a barricade as he keyed into the communication array. "Channel open, Captain. Command, this is Captain Maddox at Outpost ZETA-7. We need immediate support. The Xel'Naga forces are overwhelming, and we're running out of time." Silence hung heavy in the air, the only sound the distant roar of artillery and the cries of the wounded. Then, a voice crackled through the static, weary yet resolute. "Captain Maddox, this is General Orlov. I'm afraid our resources are stretched thin across the sector. We can't spare any reinforcements." Reyna's heart sank, but she refused to let despair take hold. "Understood, General. Then we'll make do." Maddox out, she turned to Sykes, her eyes alight with a new determination. "We're going to have to improvise. Get the engineers on those old fusion reactors. We need to make them go boom, big time." Sykes hesitated, his brow furrowing in concern. "You're thinking of using the reactors as bombs?" Reyna nodded, her mind already racing through the logistics. "It's all or nothing, Henry. We lure them in, hit the reactors, and take as many of them with us as we can." Sykes grinned, the madness of the plan infectious. "Let's do it, Captain. If we're going out, let's make it one for the history books." The engineers worked feverishly, stripping the reactors of safety protocols, rigging them to detonate with a force that would rival a small sun. Reyna coordinated the defense, ordering her troops to fall back in a controlled retreat, baiting the Xel'Naga deeper into the outpost. The alien forces, drunk on their impending victory, took the bait. They surged forward, their ranks swelling as they pressed the attack, their overconfidence blinding them to the trap being set. Reyna watched as the Xel'Naga marched headlong into the kill zone, her heart hammering in her chest. "All units, fall back to the secondary perimeter," Reyna commanded, her voice slicing through the din of battle. "Prepare for detonation on my mark." The soldiers fell back in disciplined order, the Xel'Naga hot on their heels, oblivious to the peril that awaited them. Reyna stood her ground, her finger hovering over the detonator, every instinct screaming at her to wait until the perfect moment. "Come on," she whispered to herself, willing the enemy to advance just a little further. Just a little more. The Xel'Naga were nearly upon the reactors, their alien forms silhouetted against the flickering lights of destruction. "And now," Reyna shouted, pressing the detonator with a force that seemed to channel the collective will of humanity. The ground shook with an earth-shattering roar, a blinding flash illuminating the night as the reactors erupted in a cataclysmic inferno. The Xel'Naga forces were engulfed, their bodies vaporized in an instant, their triumph reduced to ashes in the blink of an eye. Reyna shielded her eyes from the blast, the shockwave tearing through the outpost, toppling buildings and sending debris skyward. As the dust began to settle, a stunned silence descended over the battlefield. "We did it," Sykes murmured, awe-tinged with disbelief. "We actually did it," Reyna nodded, her heart swelling with a fierce pride. They had turned the tide, if only for a moment, proving that even in the darkest of hours, humanity was not so easily extinguished. But as the survivors emerged from the wreckage, battered and bruised but unbroken, Reyna knew this was only the beginning. The Xel'Naga would regroup, their arrogance now tempered by a newfound respect for the humans they had so severely underestimated. And somewhere in the depths of space, a new plan was taking shape, a resurgence that would see humanity rise from the ashes to reclaim their future. Reyna could feel it in her bones, a certainty that defied the odds, a promise of victory that lay just beyond the horizon. For in this darkest hour, humanity had discovered its greatest weapon, the unyielding spirit that refused to be conquered, that laughed in the face of despair and dared to forge a new destiny. As Reyna surveyed the battlefield, her gaze turned skyward, her eyes fixed on the distant stars. The universe was vast and full of dangers, but it was also full of possibilities. And as long as there were humans ready to fight for it, there was hope. With renewed purpose, Reyna turned to her troops, their faces alight with a resolve that matched her own. "Let's get to work," she said, her voice carrying the promise of a brighter tomorrow. "We've got a galaxy to save." The Gorgani fleet hung in the obsidian void like a bad omen, their ships bristling with weapons aimed at the ragtag human armada, which had seen better days, possibly before they were built. Captain Xerix of the Gorgani command ship, a creature whose features were as tentacled as they were haughty, surveyed the battlefield with the sort of smug satisfaction usually reserved for game show hosts and gods. "Humans," Xerix mused, the word dripping from his four mouths like acid rain. "A species so primitive they still require air to breathe. How quaint." His officers, all of whom sported the same endearing combination of disdain and 12 limbs, chuckled. None of them had any reason to suspect that the day would take an unexpected detour down a road less traveled. After all, the humans' defeat was as predetermined as the sunrise, assuming they didn't blow up the sun first in a misguided attempt to win a staring contest with it. Yet, unbeknownst to the Gorgani, the humans were about to flip the script. On the bridge of the human flagship, Endurance, Captain Jane Foster was orchestrating what some might call a symphony of improbable survival tactics, while others might call sheer madness. "Status report," she barked, her eyes glinting with a determination that bordered on foolhardy optimism. "Shields at 40%, Captain," replied Lieutenant Gomez, whose youthful face bore the worried lines of someone who hadn't yet learned to trust in the ingenuity of human desperation. "And the fusion cannon?" "Still held together with duct tape and prayers, ma'am." "Perfect," Jane said with a grin that suggested she was either about to save the day or die spectacularly trying. "Send out the signal." The signal in question was the culmination of months of desperation-fueled ingenuity, a collection of untested ideas wrapped in a bow of human audacity. It was a message transmitted on frequencies that made no sense, in a language that wasn't quite human nor machine. It was designed to confuse, distract, and irritate, not unlike a 3-year-old with a drum set. As the signal rippled through space, The Gorgani ships began to twitch like they had just realized they sat on a nest of particularly irritable ants. The Gorgani communications officer, a creature with more eyes than most species have teeth, blinked in confusion. "Sir, we are receiving something." "Something?" Xerix hissed, not appreciating the vagueness amidst his victory party planning. "Define something." "It appears to be a message, sir. It's nonsensical, but it's causing disruptions. Our targeting systems are glitching." "Glitching? Fix it," Xerix demanded, his frustration rising like the tide at a beach party for gravity enthusiasts. Meanwhile, aboard the Endurance, Jane watched the chaos begin to unfold on the enemy fleet through the observation window, her grin widening. The Gorgani had planned for everything, except the human propensity for chaos disguised as strategy. "Deploy the decoys," she ordered. From the human ships, an array of drones poured forth, each a testament to humanity's ability to turn conventional warfare on its head. They were crafted from whatever had been available: obsolete parts, recycled materials, and, if rumors were true, at least one toaster. These drones didn't attack with the customary weapons of war but instead employed lasers to project holographic images of human ships, creating a phantom fleet that danced around the Gorgani with infuriating agility. Xerox's confusion was palpable. What sorcery is this? Human sorcery, it seemed, was a potent blend of misdirection and tenacity. The Gorgani fired at the phantoms, their shots passing harmlessly through the illusions. Each miss added another layer to their frustration, while human pilots watched with the kind of satisfaction usually reserved for someone else's failed attempts at parallel parking. "Captain," Lieutenant Gomez said, his voice tinged with awe, "it's working." "Of course it's working," Jane replied, though internally she was as surprised as anyone. "Now, let's give them something to remember us by. Ready the fusion cannon." The cannon, whose reliability was on par with a weather forecast, powered up with a sound that could only be described as ominous. It was a weapon that held the promise of either spectacular destruction or a particularly colorful explosion of its own making. "Target locked, Captain," Gomez announced. "Fire." The cannon discharged with a flash of light that could have doubled as a new star in the sky. The shot barreled toward the Gorgani fleet, striking one of the larger ships, which promptly erupted in a display that would have made a supernova envious. The explosion sent a ripple of shock through the Gorgani ranks, both literal and figurative. "Direct hit," Gomez cheered, his earlier worries forgotten in the euphoria of accomplishing what had once seemed impossible. Xerix, recovering from the shock, realized his fleet was unraveling. The humans, those improbable creatures clinging to their tiny corner of the universe, were turning the tables. He had underestimated their resourcefulness, their audacity, and, most fatally, their willingness to risk everything. "Regroup," Xerix bellowed, trying to restore order, but the chaos had already taken root. On the bridge of the Endurance, Jane felt a surge of triumph rush through her veins. They weren't just surviving, they were fighting back. And more importantly, they were winning. "Prepare for another volley," she ordered, knowing that momentum was crucial. The Gorgani had been taken off guard by the humans' tactics, and she intended to keep the pressure on. As her crew worked with an efficiency born of necessity and adrenaline, Jane allowed herself a moment to reflect on the absurdity of it all. Here they were, humans, a species often ridiculed for their squabbles over trivial matters, standing their ground against a technologically superior foe. It was the kind of story that would be told for generations, assuming they lived to tell it. The Gorgani fleet was still reeling, their attempts to recalibrate their systems hampered by the ongoing interference of the human signal. It was a reminder that in the chaos of war, sometimes the greatest weapon was not the most powerful, but the most unexpected. "Incoming transmission from the Gorgani flagship, Captain," Gomez reported, a hint of disbelief in his voice. "Put it through," Jane said, curious about what their enemies could possibly want to say at this juncture. Xerox's image flickered onto the screen, his multiple eyes narrowed in a mixture of frustration and reluctant admiration. "Human," he began, the word lacking its previous derision, "you have proven resourceful." Jane inclined her head slightly, acknowledging the backhanded compliment. "Thank you. We do try." Xerix hesitated, as though grappling with a concept as alien to him as, well, humans. "I propose a temporary ceasefire. An opportunity to reassess the situation." The bridge fell silent as Jane considered the offer. A ceasefire could buy them crucial time to regroup and repair. Or it could be a ruse, a chance for the Gorgani to regroup themselves. "And why should we trust you?" she asked, her voice steady despite the uncertainty of the moment. Xerox's tentacles quivered, an indication of either annoyance or a particularly strong breeze. "Because, Captain, if you were in my place, you would do the same." It was, Jane realized, the closest thing to honesty she was likely to get from him. She weighed her options quickly, knowing that any hesitation could cost them dearly. "Very well," she said. "We accept the ceasefire, for now. But understand this. We will not hesitate to defend ourselves if you break your word." Xerix nodded, a motion that seemed both alien and understandable. Agreed. The transmission ended, leaving the humans to ponder their unexpected victory. It was a tentative one, but a victory nonetheless, carved from the chaos of battle and the grit of determination. As the bridge crew let out a collective breath, Jane turned to Gomez. "Get the repair teams working on the ships. And keep the decoys ready. We may need them again." "Aye, Captain," Gomez replied, the tension in his shoulders easing as he moved to relay the orders. In the quiet that followed, Jane allowed herself a moment to process what had transpired. The Gorgani had underestimated humanity, and in doing so, had given them an opening. It was a small victory in a larger war, but it was enough to remind everyone, friend and foe alike, that humans were not to be dismissed. They were, after all, a species known for their stubborn persistence, their refusal to give up in the face of overwhelming odds, and their uncanny ability to find solutions in the most unlikely places. They were humans, and they had just shown the universe that they were capable of far more than anyone had dared to dream. As the crew worked tirelessly to prepare for the next wave of whatever the universe had in store, Jane stood resolute, her gaze fixed on the stars. They were far from safe, and the road ahead was fraught with danger, but for the first time in a long time, hope burned brightly in her chest. And if there's one thing history had taught, it was this: you never bet against humanity when hope was on their side. The Xalax Imperium had always prided itself on its infallible logic and superior technology. With thousands of conquered worlds under its belt, it had grown complacent, basking in its own myth of invincibility. The Imperium was a tapestry of efficiency and cold calculations, woven by a race that revered predictability and scorned spontaneity. Naturally, they found humans to be an amusing curiosity, a species driven by emotion and chaos, hardly worthy of a second glance. But as the Xalax High Commander observed the unfolding events on the viewscreen, a sliver of doubt began to gnaw at his assumption. The humans, a ragtag assembly of so-called soldiers, from various nations on their insignificant blue planet, had been cornered on the desolate moon of Galdor Prime. The Xalax had anticipated a swift eradication, a clean operation that would serve as a footnote in their records of conquest. Instead, they found themselves witnessing a spectacle that defied their understanding. The humans had taken the field, not in the orderly, mechanical formations one would expect, but with an audacity that bordered on madness. Their spacecraft, a bizarre assortment of designs cobbled together from outdated technologies, danced through the void with a prowess that defied the Xalax's meticulous calculations. They moved like a symphony of chaos, each ship improvising a part in a grand, unplanned ballet, and yet somehow it worked. "Ludicrous," the High Commander scoffed, yet there was a tremor in his voice that betrayed his unease. He turned to his tactical analyst, who was busy recalibrating the strategy algorithms. "Explain this anomaly." The analyst, whose subroutines were sophisticated enough to mimic a semblance of thought, could only offer a shrug. "Their maneuvers are not within any known parameters, High Commander. They are unpredictable." "Unpredictable," the High Commander echoed, as if tasting the word for the first time. It was a concept so alien to the Xalax psyche that it felt almost profane. Yet, there it was, playing out before them in a dazzling display of human tenacity. Below, on the surface of Galdor Prime, the human ground forces were putting on their own show. The Xalax had expected them to bunker down in their makeshift fortifications, but instead, the humans surged forward, an unruly tide of determination. Their battle cries echoed across the barren landscape, a cacophony of languages but unified in spirit. Private Ramirez, a soldier from the United Earth Federation, was leading a charge that would have seemed suicidal by any logical standard. Yet, there he was, his boots kicking up the dusty soil as he rallied his comrades with a grin that was equal parts fear and exhilaration. "Come on, ya bunch of slackers. Let's show these aliens what a bad day looks like." The Zalax had equipped their soldiers with the finest in combat exosuits, each one a marvel of engineering designed to enhance physical prowess and tactical efficiency. But the humans had their own armor, forged in the fires of desperation and creativity. Ramirez's suit, patched together from mismatched parts scavenged from various skirmishes, was a testament to human ingenuity. It whirred and clanked as he sprinted, a symphony of mechanical protest that somehow propelled him forward with surprising speed. As Ramirez and his squad neared the Zalax line, they unleashed a barrage of weaponry that defied the Imperium's expectations. The humans wielded a mix of ballistic and energy weapons, the former antiquated by Zalax standards, but in the hands of these Earthlings, they sang with a deadly harmony. "How is this possible?" the High Commander demanded, his composure fraying at the edges. "Their technology is obsolete." "Their technology, perhaps," the analyst replied, "but their spirit. It is a variable we have not accounted for." On the battlefield, the tide was turning. The Zalax, for whom war had always been a calculated affair, found themselves outmaneuvered by an enemy that seemed to have discarded the rulebook entirely. The humans adapted to each scenario with a fluidity that rendered the Zalax's strategic planning moot. Their chaotic tactics, once deemed primitive, became their greatest strength. Gunnery Sergeant O'Neill, stationed with the artillery division, barked orders that would have made no sense to any Zalax commander. "Fire at will, lads. Give him hell." The artillery emplacements, cobbled together from salvaged enemy parts and human innovation, roared to life. Explosions erupted across the Zalax formations, their precision guides rendered useless against the unpredictability of human aim. It was not precision that marked the human assault but overwhelming, unrelenting force. In orbit, Captain Amelia Hayes of the UES Defiance found herself in a dogfight that would have been the stuff of legends, had the Zalax believed in such things. Her ship, a patchwork of reinforced hull and innovative energy shields devised under duress, darted between enemy lines with the grace of a dancer and the fury of a storm. "Target their comm arrays," Hayes commanded, her voice steady amidst the chaos. "Let's see how they like fighting blind." Her crew, a motley assembly of Earth's finest and most foolhardy, responded with gusto. The Defiance's cannons lit up the void, guided not just by targeting systems, but by the raw instinct of its human operators. The Zalax vessels, designed to withstand calculated assaults, faltered under the unpredictable barrage. "High Commander, we are losing our tactical uplink," the analyst reported, a hint of alarm creeping into its otherwise monotonous tone. The High Commander watched as his once flawless stratagem unraveled. "This cannot be," he murmured, his voice barely audible. "They are supposed to be inferior." Yet here they were, these humans, defying all logic with their resilience and audacity. The Zalax had misjudged them, and in that misjudgment, they sowed the seeds of their own defeat. On the ground, Ramirez had reached the Zalax front lines, his squad following suit with a fervor that matched their leaders. The Zalax soldiers, their exosuits gleaming under the harsh light of Galdor Prime's distant sun, found themselves at a disadvantage in close quarters against these unpredictable creatures. Ramirez's suit, despite its cobbled nature, held its own as he engaged in hand-to-hand combat. He dodged a blow from a Zalax soldier, countering with a swift strike that sent his opponent reeling. "Not today, buddy," he quipped, a grin splitting his dust-streaked face. As the battle raged on, the Zalax forces began to crumble. Their numerical superiority and advanced technology, once deemed insurmountable, were rendered impotent against the humans' raw determination and adaptability. It was a performance that defied reason, a testament to the unpredictable nature of humanity. Back on the Zalax command ship, the High Commander faced the grim reality of their situation. "Initiate retreat protocols," he ordered, his voice devoid of its usual confidence. "We must regroup." But it was too late. The humans, in their unpredictable glory, had seized the day. The Zalax fleet, so proud and mighty, found itself retreating from a battle it had assumed would be a mere formality. Captain Hayes watched from the bridge of the Defiance as the enemy ships began to withdraw. "Is it over?" her first officer asked, disbelief mingling with the relief in his voice. "For now," Hayes replied, a smile tugging at her lips. "But something tells me they won't be back anytime soon." On the surface, Ramirez and his squad stood victorious amidst the ruins of the Zalax encampment. The dust settled around them, the silence a stark contrast to the cacophony of battle that had filled the air moments before. "Well, I'll be damned," Ramirez said, breathing heavily. "We did it." The victory was not just in the defeat of the Zalax forces, but in the realization that the humans, with all their flaws and unpredictability, had triumphed against an enemy that had underestimated them at every turn. The Zalax Imperium, in its arrogance, had failed to recognize the power of the human spirit, a force that defied logic and calculation, a force that thrived in the face of adversity. And it was this force, this unpredictable variable, that would forever alter the course of their history. As the humans regrouped and celebrated their hard-fought victory, the Zalax retreated into the shadows, their confidence shattered, their assumptions turned to dust. They had learned a valuable lesson: never underestimate the unpredictable genius of humanity. And so, the humans stood victorious, their triumph echoing across the stars, a testament to their resilience and tenacity. The Zalax had discovered, too late, that the greatest strength of this seemingly inferior species lay not in their technology, but in their indomitable spirit and their uncanny ability to turn the tables against all odds. In the end, it was the humans who had the last laugh, an ironic twist in a story that had been written off as a foregone conclusion. The universe, it seemed, had a sense of humor after all. With the acrid smoke of battle still curling like a lover's fingers through the shattered remains of the alien armada, the humans, disheveled, battle-worn, and unexpectedly victorious, began to take stock of their improbable triumph. The war, waged on the precipice of despair, had concluded with an eerie silence, punctuated by the occasional crackle of dying fire and the distant howl of a retreating alien fleet. In the grand theater of intergalactic conflict, humanity had not merely survived, it had thrived, leaving an indelible mark on the universe's collective consciousness. The alien coalition, a hodgepodge of species that had once arrogantly dismissed humanity as upstart primates, now reeled under the weight of their defeat. Their once proud armadas drifted in the void, now nothing more than cosmic detritus. In their haste to crush humanity, they had underestimated the one thing humans had in spades: an insatiable thirst for defying odds and rewriting the rules. General Maria Torres surveyed the bridge of her flagship, the SSV Endeavor, a wry smile tugging at her lips. Her battleship had borne the brunt of the final assault, its hull scorched and battered but intact, a testament to human engineering and sheer stubbornness. She watched as her crew moved with the frenetic energy of victory, each soldier a testament to the resilience and ingenuity that had carried them through the darkest days. "Looks like we showed them," Maria murmured, her voice barely above a whisper, yet carrying the weight of hard-won triumph. Captain Allen Griffin, her loyal second in command and the voice of pragmatic optimism, nodded. "You could say we redefined the term underdog, General. I think they'll be rewriting textbooks about this one." His grin was infectious, filled with a sense of disbelief and exhilaration that matched the extraordinary circumstances. Across the fleet, similar scenes of jubilation and reflection unfolded. For Lieutenant Kayla Drummond, the war's end was a bittersweet symphony. She stood amidst the wreckage of her fighter squadron, remembering those who hadn't made it. Their courage and camaraderie had been the fuel that propelled humanity to victory. As she gazed at the vast star-studded expanse beyond, she felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude and responsibility. Their sacrifice had ensured humanity's survival, and she vowed to honor their memory by forging a future worthy of their legacy. In the political halls of Earth, the victory catalyzed a seismic shift. Nations that had once bickered over terrestrial squabbles now stood united, galvanized by the shared purpose of protecting their world from external threats. With surprising alacrity, they formed the United Earth Council, an unprecedented coalition aimed at ensuring humanity's place among the stars. Senator Elise Park, a staunch advocate for this newfound unity, stood at its helm, her voice a clarion call for peace and progress. "We must not squander what we have won here," Elise declared to the assembly, her voice resonant with conviction. "Our victory is not just a testament to our strength but a reminder of our potential. Let us not return to the petty divisions of the past but instead look forward, to the vast possibilities that now lie within our grasp." The aftermath of the war also rippled across alien worlds. The power dynamics within the coalition collapsed like a house of cards, as species previously subjugated by their more dominant counterparts seized the opportunity to assert their independence. In unexpected corners of the galaxy, whispers of rebellion and reform took root, inspired by humanity's example of unity in adversity. For the Arcturans, a species renowned for their tactical prowess yet confounded by the humans' unpredictable strategies, the loss was a humbling experience. Ambassador Threll, who had once been a staunch opponent of negotiations, now found himself advocating for diplomacy. In a galaxy reshaped by conflict, he saw the necessity of alliances not forged by fear, but by mutual respect and cooperation. Humans have taught us a curious lesson, Threll addressed the newly formed Intergalactic Council. They showed us that strength lies not in numbers or technology alone, but in the hearts of those who refuse to surrender. If we are to survive and thrive, we must learn from them. Back on Earth, the cultural landscape shifted as well. Monuments to the heroes of the war sprang up in cities worldwide, their inscriptions a reminder of the bravery and ingenuity that had turned the tide. Art and literature flourished, with stories of the conflict and its unlikely heroes capturing the imaginations of generations to come. The once terrifying specter of annihilation had been transformed into a crucible from which humanity emerged not just alive, but invigorated. As Maria Torres walked through one such monument, she paused before a sculpture commemorating the fallen. It depicted a soldier, helmet in hand, gazing resolutely towards the stars. Beside her, Griff joined her in silence, the enormity of their journey settling over them like a gentle embrace. "We did it, didn't we?" Griff finally broke the quiet, his voice tinged with awe. "Against all odds, we actually did it." Maria nodded, her eyes misty with the weight of memory and hope. "We did, and it's only the beginning. We've shown the universe what we're made of, and now it's up to us to decide what we become." Their words echoed in the wind, carried across the sprawling cityscape where life, bustling and vibrant, continued to flourish. Humanity had not only secured its place among the stars but had irrevocably altered the course of its destiny. The war had left scars, but it had also sown seeds of transformation that promised to bear fruit in the years to come. In distant corners of the galaxy, where the remnants of the coalition licked their wounds, the legend of humanity's defiance lingered like an echo. For those who had sought to conquer, it was a cautionary tale. For those who yearned for freedom, a beacon of hope. The universe had been forever changed, its tapestry woven with threads of resilience and determination spun by a species that refused to be underestimated. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of gold and crimson, Maria and Griff turned away from the monument, their footsteps leading them back into the vibrant heart of humanity's future. The world around them pulsed with life, brimming with the promise of new beginnings and uncharted possibilities. In that moment, amidst the aftermath of war and the dawn of an era, they knew one thing with absolute certainty. Humanity had not only survived, it had thrived, and its reach would extend far beyond the stars. And so, the humans spread across the galaxy, pioneers and dreamers, builders and creators, their legacy a testament to the indomitable spirit that had brought them from the brink of destruction into the embrace of infinity. They had taught the universe a lesson in humility, but more importantly, they had taught themselves a lesson in unity. In the end, it wasn't just humanity that had changed. The entire galaxy had been transformed, forever colored by the audacity and courage of a species driven by hope and an unwavering belief in the power of the human spirit. With that, the saga of humanity's rise from the ashes of war concluded, a story etched in the stars, destined to inspire and endure for millennia to come.